I'm David, 38, and I work in a small construction company in town. I've always been a hands-on kind of guy, both with my work and at home. My wife Laura and I were partners in everything, raising our kids, managing our home, and just living life together. We were married for 12 years, and we had two beautiful kids, Maria, who's 10, and Jason, who's 7. Life was busy but happy. Laura was my everything. She worked part-time as a teacher, but she was also the one who held everything together at home. Then, out of nowhere, Laura passed away earlier this year. She was just 36. It turned out she had an undiagnosed heart condition, and one day, she just didn't wake up. I can't even explain what that felt like. It was like the ground got pulled out from under me. And I was trying to figure out how to survive without the person who made everything in my life make sense. Losing Laura threw everything into chaos because I'm working a job and being a dad is not to be going too easy. Maria became really quiet and withdrawn. She started having nightmares and wouldn't talk to me about what was going on in her head. Jason, on the other hand, acted out. He was getting into trouble at school, refusing to do his homework, and just generally being difficult. I didn't know what to do. I was barely holding it together myself, and suddenly, I had to figure out how to be both parents while still managing my work. It was a mess. I started working less so I could be there for the kids, but I still felt like I was failing at everything. That's when my sister-in-law, Alan, started getting more involved. At first, I was grateful. She's Laura's younger sister, 34, married to George. They don't have kids, though not for lack of trying. Alan's had a tough time with fertility issues. She's been through IVF a few times, but it never worked out. I know that's been hard for her, especially since she always saw Laura's family life as perfect. Alan was the kind of person who always wanted what Laura had. I could see it in small things over the years. She'd always make comments about how Laura was lucky to have kids, a loving husband, and a job that let her be home a lot. I think she felt like Laura's life was what she was supposed to have but didn't get. I didn't pay too much attention to it back then, but looking back now, maybe I should have. When Laura passed, Alan stepped in, offering to help with the kids. She would come over to help with meals, laundry, and other stuff around the house. Honestly, I was in such a fog that I didn't question it. I needed the help. She started spending a lot of time with Maria and Jason, taking them to the park or just hanging out with them while I tried to juggle work and keeping the house in order. It seemed like she really cared, and maybe she did. But things started to feel off after a while. Alan would make little comments here and there, criticizing the way I was handling things. She'd say things like, "Don't you think you're working too much? Or the kids need someone who can be with them full time." I thought maybe she was just concerned, but then she started making more decisions for the kids without asking me. She'd tell me that Maria needed this or Jason needed that, and if I disagreed, she'd act like I didn't know what was best for them. I knew Alan had always wanted to be a mom, and I felt for her, I really did. But it started to feel like she was trying to step into Laura's shoes in a way that went beyond just helping out. She started suggesting that the kids spend more time at her house, which I thought was a little weird, but I figured she was just trying to help in her own way. It wasn't until things got worse that I realized how much she had been overstepping. Alan's behavior kept escalating. She began talking to Maria and Jason about staying with her more often, and it was clear that she was trying to undermine me as a parent. She'd tell them things like, "Wouldn't it be fun to live at Aunt Alan's house? You could have your own room, and I could be home with you all the time." I could tell Maria was getting confused, and Jason, being younger, didn't really understand what was going on. But they were kids, and of course, they liked the idea of more attention and fun at Alan's house. It wasn't just that, though. Alan started openly criticizing me in front of the kids. She'd tell Maria that I was too busy working and didn't have enough time for them, or she'd suggest that Jason was acting out because I wasn't paying enough attention. I was trying my best, but I started to feel like I was being pushed out of my own family. Alan acted like she knew better than me, and it was clear she wanted to take over as the primary caregiver for my kids. The breaking point came one day when I overheard Alan on the phone with her husband, George. She didn't know I was nearby, but I heard her telling him that she thought it would be better if she and George adopted Maria and Jason. She said that I wasn't handling things well and that the kids needed stability, which she believed I couldn't provide. I was furious. This wasn't about helping anymore. She was trying to take my children away from me. I couldn't hold back anymore. I confronted Alan that same day, and things got heated fast. I asked her what the hell she thought she was doing, talking about adopting my kids behind my back. Alan didn't deny it. Instead, she doubled down, saying that she was only trying to do what was best for Maria and Jason. She accused me of neglecting them and focusing too much on my work, saying they needed a parent who could be there for them full time. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her that I was their father and that she had no right to even suggest taking them from me. She fired back, telling me that if I didn't get my act together, she would report me to Child Protective Services for neglect. I was stunned. Alan, the person I thought was helping me, was now threatening to take my kids away. After that argument, I knew I couldn't let her have that kind of control over my family anymore. I told her that she needed to back off and that the kids wouldn't be staying with her again unless I said so. Alan didn't take that well, and things quickly spiraled out of control from there. Alan wasn't bluffing. A few days later, I got served with papers. She had filed for emergency custody of Maria and Jason. In her filing, she claimed that I was an unfit parent, citing my long work hours and the emotional neglect of the kids. I was scrambling. I had to find a lawyer fast, and I had no idea how to defend myself against these accusations. It wasn't like I could quit my job. I needed the income to support my family. But Alan had built a case against me, and it felt like she was going to win. I was terrified that I might actually lose my kids. I'm reaching out here for advice because I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm doing my best, but maybe I'm not enough. Is Alan right? Am I failing as a father? What can I do to protect my children and keep my family together? Update 1. Once I got over the initial shock of Alan's custody filing, I realized I had to fight back. I couldn't let her take my kids. My lawyer told me we had to gather as much evidence as possible to show that I wasn't neglecting Maria and Jason, so that became my focus. The first thing I did was adjust my work schedule. I cut down my hours even more and started coming home earlier, making sure I was the one to pick up the kids from school and be around for dinner and bedtime. I also hired a part-time nanny to help after school so that, even when I couldn't be there, the kids had someone they trusted. It wasn't about replacing myself as their parent, but I wanted to show the court that I was making efforts to create a stable environment for them. On top of that, I enrolled Maria and Jason in grief counseling. The loss of their mother had been so hard on them, and I hadn't realized how much help they needed in dealing with their emotions. The therapist was great, and I could already see a difference in how they were handling things, especially Maria. As for Alan's increasing interference, I started documenting everything. Every time she made a comment about my parenting or tried to make decisions for the kids without my permission, I wrote it down. I saved texts and emails, anything that could help me show how she was trying to manipulate the situation. I also reached out to people who could vouch for me. My employees, some clients, and the kids' teachers all knew what I was going through, and they had seen firsthand that I was doing my best to take care of my family. They were willing to testify or write letters on my behalf if needed. The support from the people around me gave me hope that I could win this, but it didn't stop Alan from escalating things even further. Alan wasn't backing down, and she was getting more desperate. She started using social media to spread lies about me, painting me as a workaholic who neglected my kids. She posted vague but nasty things about how some people don't deserve to be parents if they can't prioritize their children. She didn't name me directly, but it was obvious to anyone who knew us what she was talking about. On top of that, she began manipulating other family members. She'd tell them half-truths, like how I was always working and barely around for the kids, without mentioning that I was still making time for them as much as possible. Some family members started calling me, concerned, and even questioning if Alan might be right. It felt like she was turning people against me, and it made everything 10 times harder. But the worst part was how she started trying to alienate Maria and Jason from me. She would tell Maria that I was thinking about sending her to boarding school, which wasn't true at all. Maria came to me in tears one night, asking if I didn't want her anymore. I was furious that Alan would mess with her head like that. She even tried to make Jason feel like I was disappointed in him, telling him that his acting out at school was my fault because I wasn't giving him enough attention. I had to sit both kids down and reassure them that none of what Alan was saying was true, but it was hard for them to understand. They were already confused and hurt from losing their mom, and now their aunt was making things even worse. The preliminary hearing came faster than I expected. Alan's lawyer presented all this evidence of my supposed neglect, which included photos of my house on a messy day, because yeah, sometimes things get messy when you're a single parent, and instances where I had missed school events, which happened when I was barely holding it together after Laura's death. Alan also testified about how distressed the kids were, making it seem like I was the cause of their emotional struggles, instead of acknowledging that they were grieving the loss of their mother. When it was my turn, my lawyer presented our evidence. I showed the court that I had made adjustments to my work schedule, that I had hired help to ensure the kids were cared for, and that both Maria and Jason were in grief counseling. I also had letters from their teachers showing that the kids were starting to adjust and do better, little by little. The judge didn't make a final ruling at the hearing, but he did order home evaluations and interviews with the children. This wasn't over yet, but at least I had a chance to show the court that I was doing everything in my power to be the best father I could. During all of this, someone I hadn't expected to hear from reached out, Laura's best friend, Angela. She'd been close with Laura since high school, and we had always stayed in touch, though we hadn't seen much of each other since the funeral. Angela told me she had been watching from the sidelines, but she couldn't stay quiet anymore. She was furious with Alan and wanted to help however she could. Angela revealed some things I hadn't known about. Apparently, Alan had always been jealous of Laura, not just for having kids but for the life she lived in general. She told me about conversations she'd had with Alan over the years, where Alan would talk about how it wasn't fair that Laura got everything while she struggled to conceive. She also said Alan had been making weird comments since Laura's death, almost like she thought it was her turn to fix things by taking over Laura's role as a mother. Angela was willing to testify on my behalf, and honestly, her coming forward felt like a lifeline. She knew Alan better than most, and she could help show the court what was really going on, that this wasn't about the kids' well-being but about Alan's obsession with having the family life she always wanted. One night, while I was tucking Maria into bed, she looked up at me and said, "Dad, I don't want to live with Aunt Alan. I want to stay with you." That broke my heart because I could see how scared she was. Both of my kids just wanted to stay with me, but Alan was making them question everything. Update 2. The day of the custody trial finally arrived, and I can't even describe the stress leading up to it. I tried to keep calm for their sake, but inside, I was panicking. If Alan somehow won, I didn't know how I'd cope with losing my kids. Alan's lawyer started the trial by painting this picture of me as an overworked, distracted dad who couldn't provide a stable environment for the children. She made this emotional plea, talking about how the kids were struggling with their mom's death and how they needed a full-time parent to help them heal. Alan, of course, claimed that she was that parent. Her lawyer even brought in a so-called expert who testified that children in grief need constant attention and that a stay-at-home parent would be best for their emotional recovery. I knew it was coming, but it still felt like a punch to the gut hearing someone suggest I wasn't enough for my own kids. But the real turning point was when the therapist who'd been working with Maria and Jason testified. She talked about how grief was a long process, but that the kids had a strong bond with me and that they were gradually finding stability in our home. She also made it clear that taking them away from their father, the one constant they had left, would only hurt them more. I thought that was going to be the highlight of my defense, but then came a surprise I never saw coming. George, Alan's husband, asked to testify. George had been quiet throughout this whole ordeal. I didn't know him well, but I assumed he was supporting Alan in her attempts to gain custody. So, when he took the stand, I didn't know what to expect. What happened next shocked everyone. George admitted, under oath, that he was deeply concerned about Alan's behavior. He said that, over the past few months, she had become obsessed with the idea of taking over as Maria and Jason's mother. He revealed that Alan had always struggled with Laura's perfect family life and had even expressed jealousy when Laura was still alive. He went on to explain that Alan's desire to adopt my children wasn't about their well-being, it was about fulfilling a need in herself, one that had grown out of her fertility struggles and grief. George also confessed that he hadn't supported Alan's decision to file for custody, but she had gone behind his back. He said he was worried about her mental state and felt that Alan wasn't in the right mindset to be taking on the responsibility of raising two grieving children. Alan looked like she had been hit by a truck, and I could see the judge's expression shift as well. This was a huge blow to her case, and I think everyone in that room knew it. As if things weren't already intense enough, the next part of the trial was Maria's testimony. The judge had decided to hear from both kids, but given their ages, they didn't have to testify in the formal courtroom. Instead, they were interviewed in a more private setting by a child advocate, and those interviews were shared with the court. Maria, my sweet, quiet daughter, was brave enough to tell the advocate that she wanted to stay with me. She said she loved her Aunt Alan but that she felt safe and loved at home with her dad. She talked about how I'd been there for her, how I took time off work to pick her up from school, and how we were slowly figuring things out together. She even mentioned that she liked seeing the grief counselor because it was helping her deal with missing her mom. When asked about Alan, Maria said she sometimes felt confused because Alan kept telling her things that made her worry, like the idea that I might send her away to a boarding school or that I wasn't able to take care of her and Jason. But she was clear, she didn't want to leave her home, and she didn't want to live with anyone but me. Jason's interview wasn't quite as detailed because of his age, but he said similar things. He told the advocate that he loved his dad and wanted to stay with me. Hearing their voices on the recording tore me apart. They were scared, they were confused, but at the end of the day, they trusted me to take care of them. After everything was laid out, I was terrified, but at the same time, I felt like we had done everything we could. The judge took a few days to make a final decision, but when we were called back into court, I finally heard the words I had been praying for: the custody would remain with me. One condition of the ruling was that I maintain my current childcare arrangements, which meant continuing with a part-time nanny and keeping the kids in counseling. I had no problem with that. I wanted to do everything I could to make sure Maria and Jason were supported and safe. I finally felt like I could breathe again. But even though I had won the legal battle, I knew things weren't going to magically return to normal overnight. The relief I felt after the judge's ruling was incredible, but it was clear that Alan wasn't handling the decision well. After court, she had an emotional breakdown, right there in the hallway. She cried and screamed, saying that she had only been trying to do what was right for the kids. George tried to calm her down, but it was clear that she felt betrayed, not just by the court but by her own husband. I felt a little bad for her, honestly. I know how much she wanted children, and in her mind, she probably believed she was doing the right thing. But that didn't excuse her actions, and I had to keep reminding myself that this wasn't about her needs, it was about Maria and Jason's. Afterward, George reached out to apologize for his role in all of this. He said he was going to help Alan get the support she needed, both emotionally and mentally, but he understood if I wanted to keep some distance for now. I appreciated that, but I wasn't ready to fully forgive either of them. I still had a lot of anger about how they had tried to take my kids from me. With the trial behind us, I focused on getting back to a routine that worked for all of us. I kept my work hours flexible, making sure I was there for the kids in the mornings and evenings. I also spent more time talking to them about their feelings, especially Maria. We started having regular check-ins, where we'd sit down and talk about how things were going. It wasn't always easy, sometimes she didn't want to talk, but I think it helped her know that I was there for her. So that's it for now. I don't know when I will give out another update, but I hope this one is the final one for now.